He said it with that performative grin, the kind that begged for a camera crew standing in front of the quarterly strategy slide deck, hands on hips like he'd just conquered Rome. Let's cut the fluff. Team, no more personal trips on the company dime. We're not running a wellness retreat. I felt 30 pairs of eyes flicker my way, but none held long enough to settle. Just enough to register the sting. He hadn't said my name. He didn't have to. The vacation had been approved 6 months ago. A small cabin on Lake Coeur d'Alene, quiet, shaded, stocked with the teas my mother used to love before chemo made everything taste like tinfoil. We'd planned this carefully her first time out of the hospital in almost a year, now, because Director Bryce Halden decided to flex his budget-cutting muscles. That quiet restoration had become non-essential. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I just reached for my laptop, clicked open the corporate travel portal, and canceled the reservation. Understood, I said, softly. He didn't notice the tremor in my hand as I pressed send. He didn't know I'd already fronted the full deposit myself. He didn't know that was the last place my mother said she wanted to see before her body gave out for good. After the meeting, I walked back to my desk, each step a slow negotiation with my better instincts. I passed the wall where the old director's framed policy map used to hang, now replaced by one of Bryce's buzzword posters, agility over legacy. How poetic. I sat, logged into the compliance interface, and stared at the red blinking alert that no one else had access to anymore. Annual system license renewal. Manual submission required. Deadline. June 17th. I hovered over it for a second, then dragged it to a dormant shared folder labeled Sunset Review 2023. Readable. Not flagged. Buried in plain sight. Then I opened my notes app and created a new calendar reminder. June 18th, sit back and sip. No one noticed. They never do. Until the countdown ends. The next week arrived with a new slide deck and a sharper tone. Bryce was on a mission to modernize the flow of operational oversight. Translation dismantle anything that didn't make him look lean and disruptive. He called it efficiency. I called it erosion. First came the access removals. Without warning, I found myself locked out of the compliance renewal dashboard I had maintained for nearly 7 years. The same portal I had built reporting protocols for, down to the email tags and calendar syncs. No memo, just a system alert permission denied. Control of the dashboard was handed to Maddie, bright-eyed, perky, and 2 years into her corporate journey, most of which had been spent designing holiday-themed PowerPoint decks and asking questions like, wait, FERC is, like, the Federal Energy Bank. Right. Bryce introduced her in the meeting with a clumsy hand on her shoulder. Fresh eyes bring fresh insight. Let's strip down the legacy clutter. Maddie, eager to impress, began by disabling the system's recurring compliance alerts. They're kind of spammy, she said cheerfully, clicking through the admin panel. I mean, who needs 5 reminders for one deadline, apparently? We did. That particular setting, the one she casually toggled off, was the trigger for the entire auto-renewal compliance process. Without it, nothing would fire, no backups, no fail-safe, no last-minute pings. No one noticed. No one questioned it. Not even when I quietly submitted a handover note in the shared folder, outlining key license checkpoints. It remained unread. I checked. So, I did what professionals do when the people in charge start licking wires I documented. Every change, every Slack thumbs up, every missed reply, every system action logged and time-stamped, I copied it all to a fresh flash drive. I labeled it insurance in black marker, wrapped it in a receipt from the pharmacy, the one where I picked up my mother's nausea meds. Then I slid it under the drawer liner in my desk. And when Maddie forgot to log a license tier update the following Monday, I added that too just below the screenshot of her disabling the alerts. At home. I brewed tea the way my mother used to Earl Grey, loose leaf, with a slice of lemon thin enough to see sunlight through. I let it steep longer than necessary. The bitterness calmed me. I opened my personal laptop, not the company-issued one. That stayed zipped inside a drawer, its notifications long muted. On the screen, my private calendar blinked. June 17th, renewal submission deadline, FERC. 3 red exclamation marks. A note beside it. Manual entry required, no auto prompt. I had once insisted on that manual safeguard. Automation was efficient, but blind. There were things you wanted human eyes on, like federal license renewals that, if missed, could halt interstate billing, freeze accounts, and accrue penalties by the hour. But now, I had no portal access, no admin rights, no visibility, not even a courtesy CC on compliance updates. They'd removed me from the chain with surgical precision. The next tab I opened held the company newsletter sent just that morning. Bryce's face grinned beside a blocky headline, Legacy Role Consolidation Saves Nordax $87,000 in Q1. I read the quote 3 times. Modernizing processes means redefining who leads them. We believe in agility, not attachment. I'd built that process. I'd held it together through blackouts, state audits, and policy overhauls. I'd rewritten 3 sections of it after a surprise amendment passed at 11:47 p.m. on a holiday weekend. And now, I was attachment. I highlighted the line, copied it, and pasted it into a fresh Word doc titled When It All Goes Quiet. Then I clicked back to the calendar and added a new entry. June 18th, sit back and sip, repeat daily. Color pale green. There was nothing left to flag. No one left to warn. I had already done my job. I had done it so well that they forgot I existed. I closed the laptop gently and glanced out the window. The first leaves were browning at the edges. A quiet shift easy to miss if you weren't watching closely. 5 days after the deadline slipped by unnoticed, the billing system began coughing. It started with a flagged transmission from the Nevada office. Automated invoice data rejected mid-push. Customer support opened a ticket and labeled it a data pipe latency issue. IT jumped in. They rebooted 2 servers, cleared cache, reran diagnostics. Nothing helped. In the weekly ops sync, Bryce walked in holding a coffee cup that read, "Disrupt or be disrupted." He glanced at the agenda, then said, "We'll log it under infrastructure strain. Legacy code base. I'd bet. Let's prep a rebuild sprint." No one challenged him. Most people in the room nodded because nodding was faster than thinking. I sat in the corner, as always, 3rd chair from the printer, sipping my tea slowly enough to stretch the hour. No one asked me for input. Not after the reorg. Not since I'd become invisible. Bryce pulled up a slide with 3 bullet points and a pie chart labeled Efficiency Gains. He spoke in acronyms. Everyone pretended they understood. From where I sat, I could see the fine print at the bottom of the screen text from the same compliance flow chart I had authored 3 years ago. He hadn't even changed the watermark. They talked about modernizing the platform like it was a houseplant. You could just repot when it got inconvenient. The renewal portal was manual. Always had been. And it wasn't about bandwidth. It was about federal certification, which, as of 5 days ago, no longer existed. Still, I said nothing. They had removed the fire extinguisher and called it decluttering. I wasn't going to hand them the hose. I wrote 3 more bullet points in my private log. Then I closed the folder and renamed it Silt Line, Week 1, because that's what happens with cracks and dams. First comes the silt, then the shift, then the surge. The notice arrived at 9:12 a.m., time-stamped and automated from the Department of Energy Compliance Division. Subject line, non-compliance notification, inactive license penalty initiated. I didn't see it firsthand. I wasn't copied on the compliance inbox anymore, but systems talk. And some old habits die harder than policy changes. I received the shadow ping, a ghost echo from the secondary routing I'd built years ago, back when I still believed redundancy was respected. I followed the path, through 3 dead hyperlinks and a buried file on SharePoint, until I found it. Daily penalty, $100 per jurisdiction, regions impacted, 3 total 300 day, retroactive from June 18th. The email sat unopened in the folder labeled Policy Archive. MISC, the only user with full access, Maddie. She was still on PTO in Palm Springs, posting filtered beach photos and typing captions like Monday meetings never heard of her. I didn't forward it. I couldn't. My permissions had been revoked, and besides, if I sent it now, it would be seen as an overstep. Or worse, sabotage. That's the game they play when you've been erased. Your silence is negligence. Your voice is insubordination. So I stayed still. At 5:02 p.m., I powered down my station and slid a new USB drive into my coat pocket. Label sequenced to toe. Inside, a copy of the non-compliance notice, screenshots of the unread alert, departmental chain of command logs, Bryce's original email delegating all license responsibility to Maddie, and a zip folder titled, "Ignored doesn't mean absent." I walked out slowly. The air was heavy with late summer humidity, the kind that clings to your skin like unfinished arguments. The parking lot shimmered in the distance, empty but for 2 interns comparing kombucha flavors. I didn't speak, didn't wave. I just pressed the USB deeper into my pocket and felt the weight of 300 silent dollars multiplying with every hour they refused to listen. It started with a soft complaint from a client in San Diego. Invoices weren't updating. Their portal login kept looping back to a blank dashboard. The next morning, another one came in from Sacramento, then Bakersfield. By Wednesday, internal tickets from the California region filled 2 pages in the support queue. Regulatory access, specifically tied to energy consumption reporting, had failed across the entire state. Finance flagged the anomaly. IT said the servers were stable. Marketing was told to spin it as a routine recalibration. And Bryce, he gathered the managers in Conference B, leaned forward with his usual confidence, and declared, "We cut the fat. This is just bloat realigning." He tossed the phrase out like a lifeline, hoping someone would grab on, but no one did. Not even Maddie, freshly returned from her sun-soaked PTO, still smelling faintly of coconut in denial. I sat in the back, typing. Not minutes, not suggestions, just notes. Every missed alert, every deferred task, every redacted license reminder, every dollar of the now $2.100 fine that ticked upward by the hour. I opened a blank slide deck and began laying out the timeline. Not for them, for me. It started simple. I added receipts, screenshots, logged metadata, internal CC trails, all silent screams on white screens. No one asked what I was doing. They had long stopped looking in my direction, which was, frankly, a relief. Let them stare at the smoke and pretend it wasn't fire. Let them call it restructuring as the beams cracked beneath them. I just kept building the timeline, bone by bone, failure by failure, until the skeleton of it stood whole in front of me. It wasn't ready to show. Not yet. But when the numbers finally refused to lie, I wanted to remember exactly when they stopped telling the truth. By the morning of June 21st, the alert stopped blinking, not because the problem was fixed, but because the system had given up trying to report it. The compliance portal was fully inaccessible. No logins, no override. Just a white screen that read, "Credential invalid." Contact system administrator. There was no system administrator. Maddie was still locked out, though she hadn't admitted it to anyone yet. Freight release requests from our warehouses in Austin and Dallas bounced back within minutes. Pending certification status, hold initiated. That's what the customs flag said. The Texas hub, our largest, went dark by noon. No outgoing shipments. No scheduled payments cleared. The CRM dashboard, once pristine and color-coded, now looked like a patient flatlining in slow motion. Rows of errors, missed syncs, red indicators pulsing across the regions like pinpricks of heat on a scan. In Conference C, Bryce spoke louder. When logic failed, he defaulted to volume. We're experiencing temporary disruptions due to system fatigue. Let's not catastrophize. The room nodded. They always nodded. No one called me. I was no longer included in the meetings where people admitted they were out of ideas. I was a ghost in my own department. But ghosts remember. I updated the timeline while sipping weak tea in my corner office, if you could call the repurposed filing nook that each missed alert added to the column, each flagged shipment noted by region. I opened the cost tracker and typed in the newest number, $2,100 in fines to date. That was only the known figure. The real damage: supply chain delays, compliance penalties, client attrition that was harder to quantify for now. But I had time. So I added a new tab labeled Escalation Blind Spots. Then I saved a fresh copy to the encrypted drive in my bag. It was becoming heavier by the week, not in weight, but in consequence. I shut my laptop gently as I heard Bryce's voice rise again from down the hall, still deflecting, still spinning, still assuming someone else would clean up the mess before it stuck to his name. Taylor returned from her 10-day wellness retreat looking tanned, tired, and vaguely confused. I passed her once in the break room. She was staring at the microwave like it owed her an apology. Later that afternoon, she opened the compliance archive folder. Whether someone nudged her or panic finally set in, I don't know, but she found it. The email was still there. Timestamp: March 4th. Subject: license renewal transfer. Required review. I had written it in my usual tone: calm, precise, impossible to misunderstand. Per Director Halden's delegation structure, please confirm receipt of the attached renewal materials and assign next step responsibility. Deadline June 17th. Attached were the contacts, templates, past submissions, policy updates, and a short checklist titled Everything You Will Regret Ignoring. No reply, no action, no follow-up. The read receipt confirmed she had opened it once, for 23 seconds. That was the only log. My Slack pinged at 4:11 p.m. It was from Taylor Hi Eloan. Can you join a quick call with Director Halden, re-compliance timeline? I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, do you want help or evidence? She didn't respond right away, but the typing indicator flickered for a full minute before vanishing completely. I leaned back in my chair and opened the folder titled Sequence 3. It included the March 4 email, the read receipt, the unopened attachment logs, the renewal packet metadata, and the license expiration confirmation from the Department of Energy. I added a new entry to my timeline: June 20th, 4:11 p.m. First internal acknowledgement of missed renewal. Then I created a clean PDF version of the entire history. Titled it Requested, Not Remembered. And finally, I printed one hard copy. Not to deliver, just to see it proof that the truth had always been there. Sitting quietly while everyone pretended it hadn't arrived, I slipped it into a plain envelope, no name, no label, and placed it on the far corner of my desk. The boardroom was full, but the oxygen was thin. I sat 2 chairs from the end, quiet, composed, and thoroughly ignored until Bryce opened his mouth. He started with IT, said they failed to catch back-end credential misfires. Then he pivoted to Maddie. She'd misunderstood the importance of regulatory redundancy. Then came the usual scapegoat: the system itself. Our legacy workflows are outdated. Too much dependence on siloed knowledge. The CEO sat motionless at the head of the table, jaw clenched, pen tapping slowly against the armrest. I waited until Bryce finished his performance, then opened my laptop without a word. The screen glowed. Helvetica, black on white, clean, cold, undeniable. I slid it forward to the center of the table, between the coffee carafes and untouched croissants. The timeline read, each entry linked to receipts, emails, read logs, screenshots, calendar events, department-wide updates, all time-stamped, all unedited. Silence blanketed the room like static. No rebuttals, no spin. Just the sound of pages flipping as the board members leaned forward to read. The CEO looked down at the memo Bryce had signed, then back at Bryce. "You signed this," he said flatly. Bryce shifted in his chair. "Yes, but I assumed." "You assumed?" The CEO repeated. "And that assumption has now cost us 3 regions, 2 clients, and counting." His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. Bryce opened his mouth again, but no sound came out. His face had the color of overbrewed coffee, burnt, bitter, and drying by the second. Across from me, one of the legal advisors leaned in and whispered something to the CEO. He nodded once. Slowly, "Please leave your badge with reception," the CEO said, effective immediately. I closed my laptop gently and placed it back into my bag. No smile, no satisfaction, just precision. The system hadn't collapsed. It had followed instructions flawlessly. The formal notice came the next morning. Bryce was placed on unpaid leave, pending internal review. HR called it precautionary. Everyone else just called it inevitable. The CEO summoned me to his office shortly after lunch. The blinds were half drawn, as if trying to soften the sharpness of the conversation. He didn't apologize, but his voice held a weight that hadn't been there before. He spoke in terms like regret, oversight, an opportunity to rebuild. Then he slid a folder across the desk. Inside was an offer retroactive raise, promotion, new title Chief of Compliance Integrity. A dotted line awaited my signature. I closed the folder gently and set it aside. Then I reached into my tote and pulled out a hard case. Inside the final archive, formatted, backed up, color-coded, tagged. Organized for transition. Everything they would need if they wanted to avoid this kind of collapse again. I slid it across the desk, matching his earlier gesture. "I'm not coming back," I said calmly. I built the system. I cleaned up the silence. That's enough. He didn't try to persuade me, just nodded once, not out of agreement, but understanding. No press release went out. No farewell party. No final Slack message from me announcing my departure. I walked out as I'd walked in every morning, quiet, steady, prepared. That was 1 year ago. Today, I sit in a conference room filled with early career engineers in Denver. The nonprofit I joined, Equitable Systems Initiative, helps train women and first-generation professionals to build scalable compliance frameworks for clean energy startups. Last week, a solar company in Arizona used one of my templates to pass a federal audit with 0 flags. The founder sent me a photo of their team holding up the certificate, smiling. I printed it and pinned it to the wall beside my desk. No applause, no LinkedIn thread, just impact, properly documented. They called it quiet quitting. I call it strategic repositioning.